3 days before the legislative elections in Argentina, the ruling Front for All closed its campaign with an event in the province of Buenos Aires. 10 years of Western-backed war have left Syrian industry with losses of $23.5 billion. In Afghanistan, at least 3 people were killed and 15 wounded on Friday after a blast at a mosque in Nangarhar province. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. Three days before the legislative elections in Argentina, the ruling Front for All coalition closed its campaign with an event in the province of Buenos Aires. The main speaker at the event in the city of Merlo was President Alberto Fernandez, who was accompanied by Vice President Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner and Buenos Aires Governor Axel Kicillof, among other officials. President Fernandez reviewed the promises fulfilled by his administration and criticized the crisis inherited from the former government of Mauricio Macri, including a record debt with the International Monetary Fund, which his administration has been renegotiating. This Sunday's elections will renew half of the seats in the Chamber of Deputies and a third of the Senate, where the ruling coalition seeks to maintain a majority.
Back then, when we were told, do not stop the economy, let everything go in the same way, let those who have to die, die. We chose something else. We chose to protect you. We chose to care for all Argentinian men and women.
And President Alberto Fernandez referred to former President Mauricio Macri's role in submerging the country in debt with the International Monetary Fund and reiterated that his government chooses to prioritize the Argentinian people in order to solve the problems inherited from the previous administration.
Now we have to solve the debt the International Monetary Fund has left us with. Of course we have to solve it. But I tell you, I am not going to solve it in 5 minutes, because whoever solves this problem in 5 minutes will have accepted they are right in demanding everything they are demanding. And I give you, and not the fund, the reason, so I will take all the time I need to find the best deal for the Argentinian people.
And as Argentina prepares for its legislative elections this Sunday, the Alberto Fernandez government is hoping for a better result at the polls than during the primary elections. Our correspondent Oscar Oquera brings us the details.
The government of Alberto Fernandez and Cristina Fernandez de Kirchner needs support next Sunday on these legislative elections, because the change of 50% parliament members in the Congress of the nation and a third of the Senate would imply a natural flow and implementation of the policies that the Todos coalition is needing, not only because they could not develop them, because this executive has only had 99 days to operate COVID-free after, of course, winning the elections in 2019. The economic budget for 2022 is still to be voted on, as well as a new and less asphyxiating agreement with the IMF after the debt contracted by former President Mauricio Macri. New routes for financial entities have also been presented, as well as a social economic program to create jobs and social non-banking credits, among other products and laws. Today, officiality does not have a majority, and this is why it is so important to reach the biggest possible amount of representatives from the Todos coalition in these new legislative elections for the national parliament, which will happen next Sunday here in this South American country.
President of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has ordered the army into the streets after a spike in killings, with at least 45 violent deaths reported in the last 72 hours. As part of Bukele's draconian measures, troops were ordered onto the streets of the capital, San Salvador, where they used armored cars to block the exits of some poor neighborhoods, while police went door-to-door searching for members of the country's notorious street gangs. While the president argued that military deployment managed to contain the wave of violence, there were 11 casualties registered during the operation. Bukele also blamed the opposition for the violence of the last few days. In response, opposition sectors stressed that the situation proves that the apparent truce agreed between Bukele and the country's notorious criminal gangs is falling apart. The Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities of Ecuador and the government of Guillermo Lasso failed to reach agreements on the rising fuel prices that have led to major protests in the country. According to sources on the ground, the latest round of talks was rushed and lacked a clear agenda. Our correspondent, Maria Fernanda, brings us more details.
No agreements were reached. After 5.5 hours of talks, the indigenous movement and the government failed to agree on the reduction of fuel prices. a controversial issue which at the end of October caused a national strike.
What I picture is Leonidas Issa having to force his way in, being almost dragged by the presidential security, a meeting silenced by the president himself, who did not allow it to be openly broadcast by the press, leaving behind a bad taste after a meeting that ended in vague statements from both the government and the CONAI Confederation.
After the talks, the leader of the Indigenous Confederation proposed a deadline to the government to accept the demand to fix the price of a gallon of extra gasoline at $2.10 and diesel at $1.50.
After everything that has happened, attacks, speculations, due to our democratic spirit, we have come here to demonstrate that we seek a dialogue with results on the fuel issue. The national government will review internally what they can do. In this sense, we as a collective hope that in 15 days we can have an answer on the fuel issue.
According to Aguilar, this deadline offers a positive image for a negotiation process that is not real.
In 15 days, we will say that Lasso will not be willing to reduce to a minimum the neoliberal IMF imposed program he is engaged in, and CONAI will have to radicalize its proposal through resistance in the streets.
Citizens hope that the talks between the two sides will yield results, while recognizing that the rise in fuel prices has had an impact on the local economy. When gasoline goes up, everything goes up. Now there is no money left. We are going through difficult times. The commendable thing is that they talk and reach a good agreement, but I do not agree with the mobilizations because they damage the road and there are infiltrators that damage the city. The government has recognized that the talks will continue. Of the 6 petitions presented by CONAIE on economic and labor issues, it claims that there has been progress. We have reached 3 agreements related to the issue of credits, the management of price controls for agricultural inputs and the control of contraband, and on intercultural bilingual education. Negotiations between the indigenous movement and the government are set to continue. Meanwhile, the protests also continue, due to citizens' widespread discontent with the high cost of living.
María Fernanda Almeida, teleSUR, Ecuador.
On Thursday, the government of the Dominican Republic deported 92 Haitian pregnant women, as well as children and others at risk. So far, some 600 pregnant women are estimated to have been repatriated ever since Dominican authorities decided to increase moves against Haitians living in the country. The politically motivated move comes after the Dominican government called for foreign intervention in neighbouring Haiti, immersed in a deep political, social and economic crisis. Authorities also cancelled the visas of Haitian students in the country. The Haitian president had sought a dialogue with his Dominican counterpart, but the efforts do not seem to have had any effect, as migration authorities have begun removing pregnant Haitian women from hospitals and deporting them in violation of the country's own migration law. And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. Almost a week after the general elections in Nicaragua, in which the Sandinista National Liberation Front maintained its parliamentary majority and President Daniel Ortega was re-elected, let's take a look at the situation on the ground with our correspondent Maria José Diaz.
This is a situation in Nicaragua's streets 3 days after the general elections, when the Nicaraguan people re-elected the Sandinista National Liberation Front with 75.87% of votes, according to the official data from the Supreme Electoral Council.
Turnout was 65.26%. The total number of polling stations, 13,459, with votes counted at 13,456 stations, or with 99%, and pending 0.1% of votes. Total votes cast 2,921,430. Valid votes 2,759,743. Null votes 161,607.
For the Sandinistas, Front supported the support for the government of President Daniel Ortega shows that the population wants its social policy to continue.
Our government has paved roads, even in the most remote areas, and has brought electricity to every remote place, and it has benefited the poor population by giving them pigs, chickens, seeds. We also hope the government will work to improve worker salaries.
the Sandinista Front secured 75 seats in the National Assembly and 50 out of the 20 seats in the Central American Parliament. Sociologist Bismarck Sierra believes that one of the main challenges for the government is to maintain the macroeconomic indices, yet notes some progress in this direction.
Allowing foreign investment, making sure that the economic report, which must be presented to the central bank in January, in which meant an increase was announced and growth of 4.5% is expected, is effective and real for the local economy.
The electoral process has caught international attention. Many governments have already sent their congratulations to President Ortega and the Nicaraguan people. Meanwhile, the White House has acted very differently. Just 2 days after the election, Biden signed a law seeking to implement new illegal sanctions against Nicaragua.
María José Díaz, teleSUR, Nicaragua.
10 years of Western-backed war have left Syrian industry with losses of $23.5 billion. Syrian Minister of Industry Saad Sabag reported that the losses are concentrated in the gas and oil sector, where most of the facilities are under illegal occupation of the United States. The minister also stated that there were deliberate acts that targeted industrial strongholds involved in the production of pharmaceuticals and food. However, one of the key players in Syria's economy, the textile industry, has recovered 40% of its capacity. Nonetheless, production volumes is still below expectations due to the presence of armed groups that control vast territories from where raw materials are obtained. The Brazilian Amazon lost over 800 square kilometers of rainforest in October of this year, an increase of 5% compared to 2020. Data from the National Institute for Space Research, supported by warnings issued by the Real-Time Deforestation Detection System, point to a record loss of rainforest since the beginning of data registration 5 years ago. October saw the destruction of rainforest across 8 states of the country and over the biggest area since 2016. Meanwhile, the government of Jair Bolsonaro painted a false picture at the COP26 summit and continues to fail to halt deforestation, instead encouraging it through support for the agribusiness, logging and mining industries. In Kenya, environmental activists and World Food Programme officials said that climate change is the major cause of extreme droughts in the north of the country, leading to major food shortages. The drought is causing water shortages in some rivers in Nakaria near Kalokol, as well as in the region near Lake Turkana. For this reason, local people are forced to dig deep wells in search of water despite the poor conditions of the land. Local environmental activist Billy Kapu said that the lack of water is causing a food crisis in a region where almost 100,000 people live. The World Food Programme has also warned about the high levels of malnutrition in the region.
It is no easy task to get water out of this hole. Sometimes you dig and you come across logs stuck in the sand, and that makes it even harder to get water, and sometimes you hit dry sand, which is really tough.
For quite a number of years, there hasn't been a lot of rain in this area. So that has actually been making life quite difficult. Besides food crisis, there is increasing also need for water for the communities around.
And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Afghanistan, at least 3 people were killed and 15 wounded on Friday after a blast at a mosque in Nangarhar province. The blast happened in Spingar district around 1:30 p.m. local time. According to witnesses, the explosive device was placed inside a loudspeaker in the mosque. In early November, a similar attack killed 19 people and left 50 injured in a military hospital in Kabul, as well as other mosque blasts carried out by the ISIS-K, a group hostile to the Taliban with a strong base in Nangarhar province. Staying in Afghanistan, 3.2 million children are expected to suffer from acute malnutrition by the end of 2021, according to a report disclosed by the World Health Organization on Friday. WHO official Margaret Harris said malnutrition is spreading across Afghanistan as children under 5 years of age are victims of the worsening food insecurity the country is exposed to. Afghanistan is also suffering from shortages of water, electricity and fuel thanks to the major chaos and infrastructural damage caused by 20 years of foreign intervention and war. According to the WHO, the severity of the malnutrition crisis in the country demands a coordinated United Nations response, backed by donors from the international community. People in Sudan's capital Khartoum took to the streets in protest after the announcement that a 14-member Transitional Sovereign Council was formed. Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan issued a decree naming a new transitional council, headed by himself, to lead the country following the military takeover late last month, shrugging off domestic and international pressure to reverse the coup. The new Sovereign Council, for which one member is yet to be confirmed, includes civilians representing Sudan's regions, but none from the Forces of Freedom and Change, the political coalition that had been sharing power with the military in a transition since 2019. The move is likely to harden opposition among civilian groups who've pledged to resist the takeover through a campaign of civil disobedience, strikes and mass rallies, the next of which is planned for Saturday. The Director General of the World Health Organization warned this Friday that people in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region are starving to death and dying from lack of access to medicines.
People are dying because of lack of supplies. We cannot send supplies and medicine to Tigray because it's under blockade, and the blockade is systematic. So no medicine, people are dying, no food, people are starving, no telecommunication, they're isolated from the rest of the world.
World Health Organization authorities expressed concern on Friday regarding the progression of the COVID-19 outbreak in Europe, which has recorded the highest number of infections in 1 week since the beginning of the pandemic. They also announced that the organization has restarted evaluating Russia's Sputnik V vaccine.
Almost 2 million cases of COVID-19 were reported in Europe last week, the most in a single week in that region since the pandemic started. Almost 27,000 deaths were reported from Europe, more than half of all COVID-19 deaths globally last week.
In a presser. So the process has restarted. We are in conversations with the applicant, with the Russian government, the different parts of the Russian government, and we are expecting to have a meeting next week to receive the full. We still have to receive the full dossier from the Sputnik. There are pending issues regarding inspections to Gamaleya, inspections to the manufacturers, and there's a lot of...
The Czech government tightened coronavirus restrictions on Friday in an effort to curb a steep rise in infections. The measures came after new infections jumped to almost 15,000 cases a day this week, levels close to record numbers seen during previous waves. The Education Ministry has directed that all elementary and high schools are required to test school children and students in 2 waves on November 22nd and 29th. The state will provide rapid tests, which will be distributed by firefighters across the country. The number of new daily infections is getting close to the record daily high of more than 17,000 that was registered on January 7th. The Indian Ocean island of Mauritius imposed a raft of new COVID-19 curbs on Friday as it confronted an upsurge in cases despite a high vaccination rate. The measures were announced by Prime Minister Pravin Jugnauth, who asked people to abide by health protocols to avoid an increase in infections. Schools were closed earlier this week, with all classes to be held online, while bars and discos have been ordered to shut and concerts and sporting competitions banned. The government is also limiting the numbers of people attending gatherings, such as weddings, funerals and rallies. Many of the new cases are linked to the Delta variant, the Health Ministry reported. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss, and thank you for watching.